I relate it to like that feeling in dreams when you're flying really fast, but you don't have to put any effort into it.
Mm,
So there's a point in your dive called the free fall where you don't have to do much, but because you're at a certain depth where your lungs have shrunk so much, you're negatively buoyant. So you start sinking.
mm.
And that moment you start sinking, you can stop swimming and just let like gravity take over a little bit. And then there's like gravity helps you move in the direction that you want to do. You don't have to do anything but equalize.
Yeah, you mentioned the feeling of flying before, and
Mm,
I was going through a few freediving forums and some other podcasts that you've been on, and some other just freediving podcasts in general, and that feeling of flying seems to come up a lot, and
yeah.
people used it to describe, across almost all the conversations I listen to, people the word flying comes up at some point, but it's not
Mm,
something that I would associate naturally with being underwater, because you think about being underwater and there's this limit to how long you can stay under there. There's obviously the human body has its own limitations with how fast you can go, the manner in which you have to swim or move underwater to get to a certain point and dive deeper. Could you go a little bit, no pun intended, but deeper into
deeper.
that feeling of flying, um, like what it exactly that feeling comes from, emotionally, physically, mentally, like what's going on in your body when you're experiencing that flying of freediving?
I think it's for me, it's mostly a liberation of gravity. On land, you're not so much aware of gravity because it's always there. But like, you get up from a chair, or you try and jump, or you try and walk, and like it's all a bit, especially when you're like a big guy like me, gravity can tends to be a bit harsh. If you start having achy
Yeah.
knees, gravity's a bit of a bitch. So
Yeah, what are you? You're
it's,
you're 6'7", so you're below average height for the Netherlands, something like that. You're a short guy in the Netherlands.
I'm a shorty in the Netherlands. I'm 6'4", but it's still far enough where like when I get up, sometimes I get a bit of vertigo. So as soon as you
Yeah.
get into the water, that gravity gets lifted a bit. And then you're kind of, because water is so much thicker than air and so much denser than air, I relate it to like that feeling in dreams when you're flying really fast, but you don't have to put any effort into it.
Mm,
So there's a point in your dive called the free fall where you don't have to do much, but because you're at a certain depth where your lungs have shrunk so much, you're negatively buoyant. So you start sinking.
mm.
And that moment you start sinking, you can stop swimming and just let like gravity take over a little bit. And then there's like gravity helps you move in the direction that you want to do. You don't have to do anything but equalize. And as you're falling, you can feel the water rushing by like your hands and by your face. And it kind of feels like I imagine air would feel like when you're going much faster. So a free fall is like what, a meter a second? Like it's barely walking pace.
Yeah.
But because water is so much denser than air, it feels much faster. And you're moving without effort. You don't have to do anything. So that's the other thing. Like gravity is not as much a factor, and that movement without effort, like that must be what flying is like. You know, you're you're gliding. Uh, and yeah, yeah, that whole being liberated from the normal chains of terrestrial life. Like all of it, it is. I
Yeah.
know it's not like flying, and I've never really experienced flying except for in an airplane, but I've never jumped out of an airplane or anything, so it might be completely different. But it's very similar to what I experience in dreams when I'm flying. It's that
Yeah.
effortlessness and that freedom.
Yeah. It's, it's interesting. I've only, I only have one experience to compare it to in free diving, going down to 10 meters and doing it for that first time in Dahab. And I'm looking for some other places. I'm based in New York for people listening or watching this. So I'm looking around for some other places where I may be able to do that regularly with a partner. But I did skydive 7 or 8 months before I went freediving, and I didn't go deep enough or long enough, obviously, to feel that feeling of flying where the water, the gravity of water, the forces of water take over, and you start
Mm.
plummeting without actually starting to swim down. But I listened to a TED talk with Guillaume Neri, and he was describing one of his record dives. I believe it was 127 meters, and the way that he was talking about falling down past that 30, 40, 50-meter point reminded me a little
Mm.
bit of my experience skydiving. Once you hit the terminal velocity, and you don't feel like you're falling anymore, that you don't get that stomach drop feeling of being in a roller coaster about 4 to 5 seconds into skydiving. There's this equalization that happens where the wind is blowing up as fast as you're going down, and it doesn't feel like you're falling, but you're going down, and you feel this pressure, and it's like you're in this really cool balance of the air flowing up, but you rushing down against it. And it feels like you're kind of just suspended, but you're watching the earth rush towards your
Mm.
face. And the way that Guillaume was describing that free fall feeling reminded me a little bit about the 30 seconds of skydiving once you hit that terminal velocity point. Very different, obviously. And, I was not using any skills to skydive other than being strapped to a skilled person's, having them strapped to my back. But
Fuck.
there was some
Yeah.
crossover.
Yeah. Yeah, there's that. There's also this sounds a bit weird, but I used to really love I still love it, but like doing no fin dives. So you don't have any fins on your feet and you rely on your hands and your feet to propel yourself down and back up. And the arm stroke in that is very similar to what a bird would do. Like
Mm,
you make a big half circle movement. And that's one of those other moments where like it's just your limbs and the water, and you really have to feel like how fast you can move through it, and like you really have to kind of dance with the elements in order to propel yourself efficiently. Because if you go too fast, like you're just wasting energy, but if you go too slow, you're not propelling yourself. So you have to find that balance of like how do I grip the water, and that's like to me that always feels like part of that flying dance as well. And I know it's not the same, but like it it comes quite close. But you might be able to experience it in a pool as well.
mm,
Like if you're in a pool and you do a good push off and then a nice arm stroke and you're balanced quite right, so you have enough weight on that you don't like instantly pop to the surface, you can get like
yeah.
10 meters out of a good push off, and that's 10 meters of, to me, flying.